In this video, I'll be telling you about the 10 books that I read in June to help cure my brain rot. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jaylene. I love to read books by BIPOC authors while shining a light on unrepresented voices. If this sounds like the kind of content you would enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and join the community. Now grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's get started. Book number 1 is Enough by L.S. Lane. I want to first give a huge thank you personally to you, L.S. Lane, for gifting me this book. And I swear I'm not pulling your leg when I say this, I absolutely loved this book. It was amazing. And ever since I finished reading it, I could not stop thinking about it. Your writing is so amazing, and the way that you're able to pull the emotions out of each and every character in this book is just phenomenal. So this book is about a woman named Mary, and she goes through a very tumultuous and horrendous event in her life, but inevitably she gets a second chance and a fresh start, only to find herself working alongside her first love from nearly 2 decades ago. So as painful secrets from her past resurface, she must confront the consequences of her choices and decide whether her future love is worth keeping. Mary is such a complex character because she has so many layers to her personality and her persona. But after a horrible event in their marriage and one interaction that could not change the trajectory of their marriage, on paper she has a perfect life. She has the husband who is a professional baseball player, and together they have twin daughters. They decide it's best to call it quits. I personally feel that Mary always felt that she was living in the shadow of her now ex-husband, and she wants to become her own independent woman again. And while she's learning to deal with the love that was lost after years of marriage, an old love comes back into her life via the workspace. This gentleman, God bless his soul, he came crashing into her world in the best way possible, but Mary was making it so difficult for him to allow him to love her the way that she deserves to be loved. Witnessing Mary learn how to co-parent with her ex-husband, juggling single motherhood with the help of her mom, rehashing old strife and open wounds because of a man who has purposefully re-entered her life, has been an absolute roller coaster for Mary. Now all she needs to do is just follow her heart and trust that she will make the right decisions for her love life and her career. If you want a romantic drama with a workplace setting, please make sure to pick this one up. It is so good. The Way We Weren't by Phoebe Fox. An unlikely friendship forms between a young woman named Marcy and a septuagenarian named Herman as they navigate broken trust, lost love, and hope. Marcy is heartbroken and without a plan, so she decides to leave her home in Georgia and head down south into Florida. But inevitably, after she reaches Florida, she collapses on the beach and Mr. Herman finds her. Despite his initial reluctance, he decides to bring her in and take care of her, only with the terms that she leaves him alone. As they confront their past, they must decide how to move forward with the people they care most about. This book was such a fresh breath of air for me to read. I love both of the characters because they are polar opposites of one another, but because of their lived experiences, they have some relatabilities that are parallel. Marcy decided to pick up her life and flee to Florida because she had such an overwhelming feel of dread in her life. The mundane routine, day in and day out, really just pushed her over the edge mentally, physically, and emotionally. She quite literally wanted to escape her life to where no one knows her. She didn't have to carry the burden of her career, and she wanted to have some space away from her husband. Herman's name fits him perfectly because he reminds me of a little hermit crab. He just stays to himself. He is a very ornery and mean old man. And he's the type of old man that is mean to everyone for no apparent reason. But in his personal life, there is an apparent reason why he treats the people the way that he does, the very minute amount of people in his life. He treats them very poorly, which is not the right thing to do, Herman. You know that in your old age. But the way their stories were able to be woven into such a beautiful novel was something so much fun to read. And regarding the turtles on the cover, I feel as if these turtles are a metaphor for something bigger, a bigger message that the story's trying to tell. So we all know by nature, female mother turtles come ashore, they bury their eggs within the sand, and they go off into the ocean to live their lives once again. Once the eggs are ready to hatch, these turtles have to make the long trek to the ocean. And of course, Mother Nature steps in. Some of them make it and some of them don't. But both Marcy and Herman have been reborn in this life to become new and better versions of themselves. After everything they've both experienced in their life in the past and together presently, they can now both walk into their new life with a new perspective and how they want it to turn out for the better. And it's okay to forgive your past mistakes and current experiences as long as you grow from them and you don't look back. Medusa by Natalie Grunder. This is a dark fantasy reimagining of the Greek myth Medusa. This novel gives Medusa her own voice, exploring the events that transformed Medusa into one of Greek mythology mythology's most misunderstood figures, blending mythology with the themes of trauma, resilience, and claiming one's narrative. It offers a fresh perspective on the legacy Gorgon. I had very high expectations going into this book because this was the first time I've ever read a Medusa retelling or reimagining. I really appreciate the way the author shed light on Medusa because instead of only imagining her in such a negative light like Greek mythology has taught us to learn how to see her, Natalie wrote the character of Medusa in order for the reader to see her most vulnerable and humane side. After Medusa was cursed by Athena, everyone saw her in such a negative light and as the monster that Athena portrayed her to be and to physically look. At the beginning of her curse, she did not know how to control the powers that she was given, so of course everyone that she was looking at turned into stone. But there were a few people along her journey that did not look at her in such a monstrous way, but actually saw her as a person, and that's with all the flaws that she had. Even coming close to the end of the book, when Perseus was ordered to behead Medusa in order to fulfill a bargain, Medusa decided to sacrifice her own life in order to cling to the last bit of humanity that she possessed before her life was inevitably taken. There was nothing wrong with the plot of this book per se, but the sole reason that I gave this 2 stars is because I feel like this was a type of fan fiction. This is just a personal opinion, so don't get mad at me, and you don't have to agree with me if you have read this book. There is nothing wrong with the way that this book was written. I just was not a big fan of it. This is not to deter you from reading this book because it was a very fun experience, but it was just not for me. The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Set in a dystopian future where clairvoyance is outlawed, this fantasy follows Paige Mahoney, who is a powerful dreamwalker. One day she is captured and she is taken to a hidden city with mysterious beings. Forced into an uneasy alliance, Paige must navigate political intrigue, forbidden magic, and a fight for freedom. I managed to read up to about 15% of this book before I inevitably put it down for good. The first reason being is that I am not a very strong epic sci-fi or sci-fi reader in general. I feel like you have to have some prior knowledge of the terminology within sci-fi books, which I don't have. The second reason is that when I was reading this book, I decided to look up the series and I did not realize that this is 6 books long, going on 7 very soon. And I don't have the time nor the patience to pick up such a vast and broad series, so that is the sole reason why I put it down. Trust Me by Hank Felipe Ryan. This is a fast-paced psychological thriller about a chance encounter of a woman who is encountering a grieving mother, pulls her into a web of manipulation, obsession, and dangerous lies. An accused killer who is insistent she's innocent of a very heinous murder, and a grieving journalist surfacing from the wreckage of a shattered life. Their unlikely alliance leads to a dangerous game of cat and mouse, and as the truth unravels, nothing or no one is what they seem to be. Going into this book, I had very high expectations because the synopsis caught my attention immediately. However, once I started reading this and getting into the nitty-gritty of the story, the grieving journalist was so insufferable, but it's understandable because of everything that was happening in her life at the time. She is experiencing the hardest time of her life while also being invested in the alleged murderer of the woman that she's watching on trial right now. In this novel, the author made continuous comparisons to the real-life murder case of Casey Anthony that happened here in Florida, and the premise of this book had strikingly parallel themes to the real-life case of Casey Anthony. Long story short, the grieving mother and the alleged killer formed an alliance where they were forced into close proximity to one another. This is when the alleged murderer decided to become very manipulative and conniving in order to change the perspective that the grieving mother had toward her. She loved to play damsel in distress when all along this was just her grand plan to get away with murder. But of course in the end, the fake charm could only get her so far. I also hated the way this book ended because the build-up to the climax and the plot twist or the reveal of the climax of the story was so anticlimactic to me. It was honestly really corny. I couldn't stand it. When I got to that point, I was like, I read all of that just for this. So that's the sole reason why so many stars got knocked off of this rating. The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Dion. This YA fantasy follows along the story of Bree Matthews after the mysterious death of her mother leads her to discovering a secret society with the descendants of King Arthur's knights. As Bree uncovers this strong ancestral magic tied to her own heritage, she becomes entangled in an ancient war while grappling with grief, identity, systemic racism, and the weight of a destiny on her shoulders. I won't go into terrible detail about this entire series because I have an entire reading vlog where I discussed and read these books in 3 days. But what I can say is that at first this series started out very slow for me, but it ended up growing on me a lot. Reading book 1, Legendborn, I was honestly confused about the entire lore of King Arthur because I've had no prior knowledge of it. But as I began to read the other 2 books, it started to make more sense to me. I appreciate the crossover between King Arthur's entire lore and the ancestral magic that Bree possesses. For me, this is a very complex fantasy series that I'm not used to reading, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. But what I will say is that the only reason that I got through these 3 books is because I immersively read it with an audiobook. If I didn't have the audiobook, I honestly would have DNF'd the first one. But make sure to go watch that vlog right after this one. These last 2 books I don't have the physical copies for because I solely listened to them via audiobook. And the next one is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a contemporary horror inspired by Carrie that follows the main character, Maddie Washington. She's a biracial teenager who has to hide her true identity because she lives in a deeply racist town. When a shocking act of violence exposes long-buried secrets, prejudice, revenge, and supernatural forces that collide with devastating consequences. I thoroughly enjoyed this audiobook because it felt as if I was stepping into the shoes of Maddie every time I listened to it. She was experiencing very difficult times as a biracial student in a very racist town, and she had to keep her identity a secret. And her father would always scold her about never getting her hair wet because if she did, then her true identity would be exposed and then she would be seen as an outcast. But that is exactly what happened one day, and unfortunately Maddie got her hair wet. Black fatigue is a real thing, and this was an internal fight that Maddie had to deal with on a daily basis. From her having to use a hot comb so that her kinks would never show, to her having to try to pass as white so that she can be safe in a town that was never meant for her to live in. That's no way for anybody to live. But once her true identity and her true race got exposed, that is when the bullies and the racists of her school and her town got exposed as well. And to make matters even worse, some students at her school decided to pull a prank on Maddie, which ended up backfiring right in their face, because that night turned into a disastrous night of supernatural forces that nobody was meant to see, and a lot of devastation happened. This is an amazing book if you want to read about racial injustice, segregation, the real ultimate revenge story for the ages, because this book was amazing. The very last book is The Girl in the Train by Paula Hawkins. This is a psychological thriller centered around a woman named Rachel, whose daily train commute leads her to be so transfixed and obsessed with a seemingly perfect couple. When the woman she's been watching day in and day out goes missing, she decides to become obsessed with this woman's missing persons case, where memory, deception, and illusion blur the lines between reality and what she's made up in her head. I want to talk about the comparison between the movie and the book because that is what I did this past weekend. For the most part, they are parallel aside from very small changes that happen from the book to the movie, but those small minute changes didn't affect the plot or the storyline of the movie. Also in the book, there is a lot of internal monologue with the characters, and of course in the movie, they need to have a lot of buffer conversations so that they can keep the storyline moving along. The actress depicting Rachel in the movie did such a wonderful job showing how inebriated she was on a daily basis. That woman can drink you under the table. Will she remember everything at the end of the day? Probably not. And Rachel's life was inevitably unfolding in front of our eyes, both on screen and in the book, after she was divorced to her now ex-husband Tom. And to be frank, Anna and Megan, who were also the women involved in this storyline, they too had miserable lives, even though from the outside it seemed like their lives were perfect. From Rachel's perspective, these 2 women have the most perfect life, but in reality, Anna is pissed that she's living in the same house that Rachel and Tom once lived in together, and Megan is committing adultery. Regarding the plot twist and the person that was involved with the disappearance of one of the women in the story, I had an inkling of who it was, but it was so obvious and evident when I began to watch the movie. They gave little Easter eggs away, but you would just overlook this person, but once you know who to look for, it is so obvious who did it. The end concluded in a very sweet way, but not everything in life is butterflies and rainbows. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Make sure to check out my previous reading wrap-up so that you get caught up with every book recommendation that I want you guys to read. Thank you so much for being here and watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.